Hey everybody, I thought I would do a brief series on the concept of religion and how it developed. And I want to start in this video in the Roman period with the Latin word religio. Its etymology is unknown and really irrelevant because it is its usage that tells us what it meant. In the 2nd century BCE, a playwright named Plautus talked about a character who said he was invited to dinner and he couldn't turn it down because he had religio. And a Loeb Classical Library volume translates that as scruples. We have Cicero, who said it is a virtue that is to be contrasted with superstition, while Lucretius said that it was a synonym. Julius Caesar used it to refer to the obligations of an oath. Across all this usage, it seems to be a broad and somewhat generic reference to the duties and obligations that were imposed on individuals with regard to their relationships to gods and also to other people by society. Hey everybody, part 2 in our discussion of the development of the concept of religion. Let's talk about religion and early Christianity. Some of the earliest Latin translations of the Bible used religio to render the Greek threskia, but that wasn't popular with everybody. In fact, Augustine in the early 5th century says that that word is not appropriate to refer to Christian worship because it is too ambiguous, because it doesn't just refer to worship of God, but obligations and duties within human relationships. So it wasn't overly popular. It was borrowed into Christianity in reference to monastic orders, however, and that became the predominant use. In fact, that's what the Oxford English Dictionary lists as the first definition of religion when it was borrowed around 1200 CE from Anglo-French into English. You joined the priesthood, and then if you joined an order, that was the religion. If you did not, you were secular. And so here, for the first time, religion can be plural. You have multiple religions. Hey everybody, part 3 in my series on the development of the concept of religion. Let's talk about religion during the Renaissance. Now, up to this point, everything has been primarily external. It's behaviors and rites, it's structures within institutions. But during the Renaissance, there's going to be a critical pivot. You're going to get humanist scholars, particularly Platonist Christians, who are trying to heal a fractured humanity that has been at war, particularly between Christianity and Islam. And they're going to try to bridge the gap of these two traditions by reducing religion to something internal to all humans, an impulse towards God that is manifested in the various rites and rituals that are socially contingent. In this way, they can reduce all of the different rites, the variety of rites, they call them, to something that is common to all humanity. So folks like Nicholas of Cusa, Marsilio Ficino, they're going to appeal to this understanding to try to unify all of us. This is part 4 in my series on the development of the concept of religion. Let's talk about the Reformation. So the Renaissance interiorized religion, made it about an impulse to God for humanist scholars trying to unify humanity. By the time of the Reformation, you had people concerned for the abuses of the Catholic Church trying to restructure power. One of the ways they did this was by suggesting that religion was only true religion if it had an appropriate object of worship, the Christian God. And this allowed them to put the Catholic Church in the crosshairs by suggesting that they held up the church, the Pope, the priests, relics, rites, got in the way of that impulse to God and made it counterfeit religion. And one thing that helped the Reformation was the fact that they were trying to wrest civil authority away from ecclesiastical authority, and there were a lot of civil leaders in countries around Europe who decided they wanted in on that. And this is one of the things that reified the dichotomy of politics and religion as sociocultural domains. Hey everybody, part 5 in my series on the development of the concept of religion. Let's talk about the Enlightenment. Now, the Reformation gave Enlightenment thinkers a concept of religion as primarily about beliefs and not about behaviors, and they liked this quite a bit. They got rid of the revealed religion part, replaced it with rationalism. Now, this helped Enlightenment thinkers at the time as the natural sciences were growing, as they were becoming aware of more societies in the Pacific, in Asia, in the Americas, and it helped them subsume all the traditions they were finding within this one framework of religion, which they reduced to a series of propositions. Lord Edward Herbert of Cherbury's 5 Undeniable Propositions is probably the first definition of religion out there. However, it still has a distinctly Protestant flavor. But in doing this, it allowed them to accommodate all these traditions, but also find themselves at the top of that hierarchy and everybody else down below, which facilitated European imperialism. Everybody, part 6 in my series on the development of the concept of religion. Let's talk about American imperialism in the 19th and 20th century. As America started trying to develop diplomatic ties with other nations around the world, one thing that was very important to it was the freedom of religion. However, a nation had to have a concept of religion, and many did not. But that was okay, because America was willing to provide their own, and that's precisely what we did. We took that lens we took from Enlightenment thinking about religion as a set of propositions, and we overlaid it on the traditions of a bunch of other nations. And because those relationships were also very important to those nations, they began to think and to talk about those traditions in terms of that framework that we overlaid. A good example is Japan. We went in 1853. We said, what's your concept of religion? They said, we don't know what that is. And we said, here's your concept of religion. And Shinto became a religion. So did Buddhism. And so from then on, Japanese folks started talking and studying about these things as if they were religions. Hey everybody, part 7 of my series on the development of the concept of religion. Let's talk about the academic study of religion today. So, understanding religion as something that developed within the power struggles and the imperialist goals of Europe and America leaves scholars with some questions. Does something that we can call religion exist in a delineable way apart from our own discourse about it? A lot of scholars would say no. They would say that it is discursively reified, which means it is created by our discourse about it. And this leads to some other questions. If this is the case, how do we understand religion? How do we define it? Can we define it? How do we teach it moving forward in a way that disrupts and deconstructs the imperialism that seems to be inherent in the category? Hey, thank you for a great question. There were always folks who saw in the imposition of this framework an opportunity to increase access to power and resources and advance their social and economic interests. And so some folks adopted it eagerly and promoted this view of whatever traditions they had that better fit the mold of the Western notion of religion. And often this also had government support. So sometimes they became more salient than the older, more traditional views. However, there were always people who were pushing back and trying to maintain those older views. And recently we've seen a lot of societies try to push for a return to the older traditions. 3 good books on this. James Cox, The Invention of God in Indigenous Societies. Tomoko Masuzawa, The Invention of World Religions. And Daniel Dubuisson, The Invention of Religions.